Hi, I'm Jean Fleming. I'm with the PASA, the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today, an inside look at primate rescues. We have with us today Gregg Tully, who is the Executive Director of PASA. We have Ofir Drori, who is the founder and director of the Eagle Network, and Christelle, Colin, who is the Executive Director of the Chimpanzee Conservation Center in Guinea. And together we'll be talking about the exciting world of primate rescues, all that goes into it, a very complex and interesting subject. We have a couple of housekeeping things to share before we dig in. If you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A of the Zoom program. And we have Caitlin Bach from PASA will be monitoring those and making sure that we get to have a look at them. We have time toward the end of the webinar to address questions. So hopefully we'll get to all of them then. If you've got any technical issues, please also let us know. You can do that through the chat. And the webinar is being recorded. So if you'd like to share the link once we send it out, you can share it with friends. Or if folks that you know who wanted to see it were not able to join, they'll have a chance to look at it afterwards. So with that, I'm going to start us off and we'll take a quick look at what we're doing here. So we just did our welcome. We've got Gregg, Ofir, and Christelle, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So Gregg, I'm going to hand it to you to start us off.
All right. So PASA is, probably all of you know, PASA is the Pan-African Sanctuary Alliance. So it's an association of 23 primate sanctuaries and rescue centers in 13 countries across Africa. It was founded in 2000, actually founded by the member sanctuaries as a way to increase communication among themselves. And over the years, PASA has taken on a lot more roles, including building capacity for our members, emergency support, networking, helping to form a cohesive movement of these organizations and representing them worldwide. And our networks are critical. Our partner organizations around the world, sanctuaries and other organizations, vets, other kinds of specialists, volunteers. It's really it's a big family. Next slide, Jean. So collectively, I'll give you some statistics. The PASA members give jobs to 668 African people. Every year, they put more than $6 million into local economies, ranging from buying construction material to buying food for the animals. They run education programs that reach more than 500,000 people every year all across Africa. And they also run a wide range of conservation programs, ranging from real grassroots community-based projects up to creating new national parks and passing stronger legislation to fight wildlife trafficking. Next. All right, so we're here to talk about rescues. Rescues are some of the most complicated operations that PASA and our members are involved in. A lot of people aren't aware of all the components to a wildlife rescue, especially if the animal needs to travel to a different country. At any point in time, we're working on a number of rescues that are in various stages. Because of PASA's focus, we usually rescue primates in Africa, but people contact us about all types of animals everywhere in the world. So why would an African primate need to be rescued? Well, there's a range of reasons. It might have been confiscated from traffickers, and law enforcement officials in the country don't have any facility to put it in. Someone might have been keeping an animal as a pet, but it got too big and dangerous, and now they don't want it anymore. It could be a pet and its owners want to keep it, but other people have asked us to save it from a bad situation. Sometimes we save animals that are chained up as hotels to entertain the guests. Another reason is that it could be in terrible conditions in an underfunded zoo. So when we learn about an animal in need, we collect as much information as we can about the animal, its owner, the situation it's in, its species, age, etc., and especially if it needs urgent medical care. For international rescues, and by international I mean moving an animal to a different country, there are two things that we really need. One is to be able to get the animal from whoever owns it, And the second one is somebody in the country who's willing to help. Without those two things, the rescue probably won't be possible, at least not possible for us to make it happen. Through our networks, we're generally able to identify a person or organization on the ground who can be our local partner and who can, pressure government officials to provide permits, arrange transportation and other logistics. For example, in Guinea-Bissau right now, at least 4 chimpanzees are living in captivity and there's no sanctuary. So we've been working with an NGO employee and a nurse in Guinea-Bissau who are very dedicated to helping these chimps. And through them and with them, we're building relationships with relevant government officials and convincing these officials to give permission for the chimps to go to sanctuaries in other countries. But it can be hard to get the animals from their owners. It's heartbreaking, but we simply aren't able to rescue every animal that we want to. A common example is when an animal's in a zoo and the zoo has the animal legally and isn't willing to let it go. I mean, the worst example I can think of is the PASA Zoo, which is high up in a building in Bangkok, and they have orangutans, monkeys, a single gorilla. I think they have 1 chimpanzee now, among a lot of other animals, all in atrocious conditions, but they don't have them illegally, and so no one can force them to let the animals go. Another example is when someone has a pet primate and they want to keep it. And we and our partners on the ground can try to convince them, and we can ask law enforcement to intervene. But sometimes the owner refuses to let the animal go, and law enforcement just doesn't consider it worth their time. So it's invaluable that PASA has members in 13 countries that all have a lot of experience rescuing primates and often other species as well. If an animal is in need in a country where there's a PASA member, often that organization can take the lead using their connections with government agencies and their expertise. Sometimes they can simply drive to get the animal, which makes things a lot easier. But if the animal is in another country, PASA International, the organization based in the US, often coordinates with the various people and organizations and agencies involved. So I think of 2 phases of these rescues. There's, urgently ensuring the animal's care and welfare, and then transferring them to the sanctuary. So for that first phase, after we've collected information, we often give advice to people about taking care of the animals. This might include appropriate food. I mean, sometimes people have animals, they're just feeding them junk food or leftovers. Keeping them safe. We might arrange for a vet who has primate experience to travel and do a health exam, give any treatment necessary. The second phase is a lot more complicated. The next slide, Jean, please. So we reach out to our member sanctuaries that we take care of the species that we're trying to rescue, and we ask if they have capacity to accept it. If the animal's in a country that doesn't have any sanctuaries that can accept an animal of that species, then we'll need to arrange various documents from the source country and the destination country. And specifically, what's needed is different for every country. So I'll talk a bit about CITES. So CITES is a treaty between almost every country on Earth that regulates the international trade and transportation in endangered species. Now, I could talk all day about the limitations and problems of CITES, but for now, I'll just focus on what's related to rescues. All primates are protected by CITES, and a CITES export permit is needed to move a primate to a different country. And for some highly endangered species, including great apes, an import permit is also needed, obviously from the country it's going to. So this gives these animals more protection from being exploited by commercial trade, but it also makes it a lot harder for us to rescue them because arranging these permits can take months, especially in countries that have never exported primates or where the CITES officials haven't been adequately trained. They might not really understand the process and they might stall to avoid making a mistake. Additionally, countries generally require certain tests to be done to show that the primate is free of common infectious diseases. And if the country that the animal is in doesn't have any labs that are capable of doing that test, we might need to get CITES permits in order to send their blood to a lab in another country. And then if the tests come back negative, we need to get more CITES permits to send the actual animal to a sanctuary. We usually need a health certificate from a vet, often a government vet. And especially with great apes and other high-profile rescues, it feels like every government agency wants to get involved, and they won't let the animal go without establishing diplomatic channels with their counterpart in the other country and exchanging official letters of approval. I mean, this can include foreign ministries, Interpol, regional governments. So all of this can literally take years. It's the permitting process can be mad. So in addition to the documents, we obviously need to arrange the transportation. In some cases, the animals can travel by road. So this photo here shows Frank of Jack Sanctuary, who spent days driving with an NGO named Rhino Force to bring 20 confiscated monkeys from Zimbabwe across Zambia to DR Congo. This is the largest primate confiscation known to PASA, and it took over 4 months, which is, a long time, but definitely not the longest that we've dealt with. But often with international rescues, the animals need to fly, and this might be pretty simple. You might have seen a video of a baby chimp on the lap of a bush pilot flying to Luiro Primate Rehabilitation Center, but more often it requires building an airline-approved crate, arranging transportation over land to an airport, cargo flights, transportation from the destination airport to the sanctuary on the other side, and sometimes a vet needs to travel with the animal to ensure their health. The next slide, please. So rescues can be expensive. I mean, CITES permits, blood tests, the crate, building the crates, this costs hundreds of dollars. Air cargo is usually thousands of dollars. There may be other fees involved, and the biggest and most overlooked cost is the sanctuary that's committing to probably decades of food and medical treatment and care for the animal. That's the hardest part of these rescues to fund, but it's also by far the biggest expense. So it's important not to overlook that. And these animals often come to the sanctuaries very traumatized, so they often need specialized care, a lot of treatment, a lot of attention from the staff. And so the skills of the PASA, the caregivers of the PASA member sanctuaries are critical for this. They help the animals relearn the skills they need to integrate into a social group, to live outdoors, in some cases to have an opportunity to be released back to the wild. PASA conducts fundraising for specific rescue efforts and sometimes for specific aspects of the rescues. For example, we recently raised funds for Takugama, which is a PASA member in Sierra Leone that has taken in 23 orphan chimps over the last year or so, and they needed funds to expand their chimpanzee nursery. Next slide. So we didn't know if the pandemic was going to slow down the need for rescues, but as you can see, it definitely hasn't. The number of rescues conducted by PASA members actually increased by 22% last year, which is a huge accomplishment given all the challenges of functioning during a pandemic. You can see this table is divided up into rescues with and without the involvement of law enforcement. Most of the ones without law enforcement were animals who were victims of abuse, in road traffic accidents, or electrocuted on power lines and similar. And lastly, it's important to emphasize that in addition to rescuing animals from these horrific situations, the PASA members are essential for law enforcement. In many countries that don't have primate sanctuaries, we've seen that law enforcement officials don't arrest people who illegally have wildlife because the officials just don't have anywhere to put the animals. It's a lot easier for them to look the other way or accept a bribe than try to figure out what to do with let's say a confiscated baby chimpanzee when there's no facility in the country for it. So sanctuaries have a critical component in fighting against wildlife crime through these rescues. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregg. We're going to invite Ofir Drori now to share his experiences working on the kind of more on the law enforcement side of this. Thanks. Ofir, go ahead.
Yes, sorry, you can hear me now. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity. I wanted to talk just a little bit about the work of wildlife law enforcement, that this perspective, but um, uh, mainly to give an insight on the illegal trade in great apes, maybe giving some examples so that there is a more familiarization of what is exactly wildlife crime, who are the traffickers, what are the real obstacles for wildlife law enforcement. Um, Basically, we are working on wildlife law enforcement as the Eagle Network. I'm the director of the Eagle Network. We work in 9 countries, almost 10 now. And when we arrive to new countries, these are the kind of things that we see usually, which is a rampant trade, illegal trade in great apes that is quite obvious. And what we see in each country we get to is basically the same story, which is that this trade is not rooted in poverty, but in the rich and the powerful. Most of what you see here was ordered by very wealthy individuals. Also, there's laws in all these countries to protect these animals, but the same people who are in charge of enforcing the laws, wildlife officers, police officers, are usually the same ones running the trade, being corrupt. What you see here is a crate that was used to transport 6 chimps at a time, fetching dozens of thousands of dollars for each chimp for the trafficker. So looking at all this, understanding it's a story of corruption, it's a story of very organized trade, it's a story of where the trade is rampant and quite open. Having said that, there is a law in all of these countries that gives imprisonment for anybody even touching a chimp or a gorilla. The question we ask ourselves in each country is, so how many times this law was enforced, was applied for a decade or 2 decades or even 3 decades of its existence? And usually the answer is zero. Zero wildlife prosecutions. And that is the story of lack of enforcement. So when we try to investigate and try to realize what gives that zero, we are led to the obstacles of wildlife law enforcement. And the first obstacle for wildlife law enforcement is corruption. And the second one is corruption. And the third one is corruption as well. So by far, corruption is holding back the enforcement of the wildlife laws. And when we came into the field, we came with a lot of criticism, also on the conservation world, on its lack of appetite to tackle these first big obstacles. And so we opened the Eagle Network now in 9 countries, almost 10. Basically, what we do is undercover investigations to infiltrate those rings and try to get more important traffickers. Organize arrest operations with the authorities, but supervise those arrest operations. Follow those cases up in court, do a legal follow-up, even a private prosecution. So we are controlling the prosecution of those cases, even controlling those traffickers in jail, as well as advertising the positive actions so that people will see that there is deterrent now that the law is applied. And throughout this entire chain, we basically fight corruption. So we're sort of bodyguards also of the entire process against corruption. We're more of an anti-corruption body in that sense. So now I can say that we have more than 2,500 major traffickers we managed to put behind bars. And we hit corruption in higher levels. We still have a lot of work to do. All this is not just the ape trade. It's in general also ivory, also leopard skins, lions, etc. But the illegal trade in apes is a very important part of wildlife crime as a whole. I'll try to give you a bit of an insight of how actually it works from our work. Here is one example. This woman is called Madame Goma, and Madame Goma lived most of her life in France. And she came back to Ivory Coast, her country, as a diaspora. And when she came back in, she had a great idea. to make money. Wildlife trade. She was thinking that can be one of the more lucrative businesses she can put her money into. And so in her big house, she started opening cages and different animals and stocking animals and started selling antelopes, different kind of animals. Later, she started selling lion cubs, leopards, and also chimps and gorillas. So when we started targeting Goma, I was actually the actual investigator. So I was trying to pose as a trafficker, an Arab in Asia, in the Far East. And throughout the time, slowly, we managed to create some trust through many video calls and phone calls. And she confided with me her dreams. And her dream was to open a big zoo that would be a stock of wildlife that she can export, and mainly the protected species. She was aiming to try to get much better relationship than she have now on corruption with wildlife officials, so that she will be able to do all of these illegal exports of chimps, gorillas, leopards, lions, etc., by being covered by corruption of government. That was her dream. And in November, we managed to get her arrested. So she tried to sell me this baby chimp finally. And Rence's team, our team in Ivory Coast, managed with the authorities to get her arrested and rescue this baby chimp. So that's one example of a profile of a wildlife trafficker. That was maybe the last one we had with the baby chimp. Here's another example. What you see in this picture is a car moving from Cameroon towards Nigeria to cross the border with 50 kg of marijuana in those big sacks and cocaine in this small container above. And I'm sure you already identified that right in the middle, you have a baby chimp with wrapped in diapers and a bottle of milk just below. This was our investigation. The investigator, the undercover investigator, was following the lead on a ape trafficker, and he managed to realize that basically he was also a drug trafficker. So we were trying to pursue that and try to make sure that we are getting everything at the same time. And he got close to the trafficker. The investigator got close to the trafficker up to a point where he knew when he's going to export all the things to Nigeria to make money. And the investigator managed to be in the car with him so that we were able to arrest the trafficker on the road in a roadblock and rescue this baby chimp. So that is not an isolated idea if you kind of think why the drugs are connected to the chimps and why is in the middle. Then traffickers are trafficking. They are traffickers and they're all interested in how much money they can make. And in fact, the money that he can make from this baby chimp in the middle exceeds the illicit revenue he can make from everything around it. Now, we employed several poachers. They poach different things, but he is interested in the high value things that they can bring him. And that is an example of that. And this is a trafficker arrested. He was put in jail. Gregg was mentioning how difficult it is that the care for a lifetime for a chimp like this. We do the easy work of actually arresting, but there is a lifetime work that needs to be done for taking care of this baby chimp. And Gregg was mentioning that sometimes the care is specific. And here in this example, this baby chimp guy was getting to the Limbe Wildlife Center. He had a bullet lodged in very close to the spine that later on made him paralyzed from waist in the lower part of the body from that point. And for something like that, you need to have many different instruments and ways for a chimp like this to function. So here's a good example of something that Gregg was mentioning. Back to our trafficker here, I want to give you another interesting anecdote on corruption, since I mentioned corruption before, and I'll probably mention it many times during this small talk. when we have a trafficker, we are getting jail visits to him. So if he's in the cell, in a police cell, we visit him in the morning, early morning, and late at night to actually see if he didn't bribe his way out. And after he got prosecuted, convicted for 3 years imprisonment, we continued to visit him. Every week we check if he's actually in jail. Hello, how are you? You're still in jail, you didn't bribe your way out, very good. And so 1 week passes, second week passes, third week passes. Each time our legal advisor is coming in and checking, doing jail visit for this trafficker. And every time he's there. And one of the times the legal advisor goes out, and as he goes out, the guard of the prison tells him, oh, you are very lucky every time. And so the legal advisor asks, I'm lucky, why? Well, because every time you are there, he's there. And then the legal advisor was asking, what, you mean that he's not there all the time? Of course not, I thought you knew. The story is that when the head of the prison was actually realizing that he has somebody so talented in his jail that is activating several poachers and can get real protected species that can gain a lot of money, he said, you know what I have? I have guns, prison service. That's a great combination. So every time he was letting him out a few days at a time with guns from the prisons to poach for him, to get protected species sold for him. So here is a small anecdote on corruption on this case. These were two examples of live illegal trade in live animals. But we also have trade in parts of animals, in parts of chimps and gorillas. And what you can see here are one of many cases we had of skulls of gorillas, skulls of chimps. And they are used both for black magic inside Africa and also decoration outside of Africa. And you can see some of it here. You can also see a skin of a gorilla, a fur of a gorilla just there. We didn't have a lot of examples of this, but it exists. So different parts are sold. A small anecdote is that a lot of times, sometimes we've seen that one of the skull is painted in red. And the second time we saw it, we started asking, why is it painted in red? And in fact, it was a sort of black magic in order to protect the trafficker to not be arrested, in fact, rendering him invisible, which apparently didn't work very much because we managed to get them arrested. So I want to give you another example of the large-scale live animals traffickers. This example is from the work of Charlotte Uplin, from a project in Guinea. And this trafficker, Ousmane Diallo, here showing his different stocks of chimps, selling birds and primates, and here he is arrested in not very great times for him, was giving us a good insight on how the large scale is actually working. So these are all quotes from Ousmane Diallo. And he's saying, I sold more than 500 chimpanzees from 1994. Imagine one person, one individual is in charge of 500 chimps sold. You can imagine the slaughter that is behind that. Sometimes I can sell 10 or 15 chimps in a time, right? We have clients for this, the Ship Las Palmas in Spain. Every time they come to Guinea for fishing, they get chimps and parrots they buy now in big quantities. By the way, this is a good example of where the illegal trade in apes is not just moving to China or to faraway places, it also moves to Europe. And in this example, which is pretty typical, we were informing the Spanish authorities through Interpol, and we got no traction whatsoever. There was completely zero reaction. I'm not yet a multimillionaire, but I'm a millionaire. In these years, in these specific years, in God's name, I can tell you in Conakry, they couldn't find a richer man than me. I know they are protected, they are forbidden. We export them in a mix with parrots and with the apes, with many birds. The whites, meaning the clients which are foreigners, they also know how to pass them there. He's talking about Spain. So this is an example of of large-scale individual and how much harm one individual can make as being specialized and successful in his illegal trade. So traders like this, their profile is that they are not usually just for apes. They have a front. The front is usually a legal wildlife trade, some species that are permitted for trade, and then they try to trade illegally those CITES 1, the most protected species, which are also usually the ones that makes the highest revenue. And chimps are just one. Chimps, gorillas are just one part of this trade. Here you see the example that illegal wildlife traffickers are holding stocks of chimps or gorillas. Okay, you can see from these pictures. These are all in Guinea, by the way, are all stocks pictures. They are gathering the chimps in order to export them. They're gathering them instead of in getting them at one time to supply bigger traffickers. Here's another example, also from, before that, another animal here, or another phenomena, is the criminal family on the live animals trade. What you see here, all these circles, is one family, one criminal family. Look how spread they are in all these countries. They work together. They work together as a family, and here is a second family. Now imagine those two families working together. Look at the stretch of their illegal business. This is transnational organized crime. They work together, they collaborate together. One can ask for a CITES permit illegally obtained from one country to get to another export. Another can say, hey, I need more chimps because I have a deal here and I have only 6, bring me another 4. They operate together as one business, and this is the model of the criminal family. And here is another example I want to give you on the high-level corruption of the live animals trade. And this is the work again of Charlotte Uplin from Guinea. We are working on trying to get this person who is the top. He is the person in charge of CITES in his country. He's also a sort of the wildlife director, the person in charge of all wildlife in his country, the top official. And we knew that he is also a big trafficker of apes. So we couldn't get him, so we tried to get another trafficker that is working with him. And when we managed to get that trafficker arrested, now Charlotte was linking this case with the person who gave him the CITES permit, Ousmane Doumbouya. So Ousmane Doumbouya was the guy that was behind all this. When Charlotte was getting him into the Interpol office, he was thinking that he's coming for a small verification. He answered all the questions, and at a certain point in the evening, he was saying, thank you very much. I hope you really succeed in your mission, Interpol. You know, I always want to help you. And he got up and said, well, you know, if you need anything else, you can always call me. I always help you. Of course, at this moment, he was arrested as a very high official that was behind bars. Interestingly, he came in with a briefcase during this interview, I will call it. And after arresting him, Charlotte looked at the briefcase, and what she found was many empty CITES permits. So the permit that can be facilitating a trade in a chimp and make it legal was just in his briefcase. So basically, Doumbouya, this high official, was moving around everywhere, including to the Interpol, as a one-stop shop of your trafficking needs. Whenever you need something, Doumbouya can just get out and give you an empty permit. It's already signed. Go and do it. And he was put in jail. And that is a good example of high-level corruption and how it goes. And I can tell you that this is not an isolated example. The corruption in the illegal trade in apes reaches very, very high levels. Last example I want to give is from the internet trade in great apes. That's another kind of trade. I think that many of you have seen sometimes circulating somebody offering a chimp for sale or a gorilla for sale. A lot of times, most times, actually, this is fraud. in the beginning, when this fraud started, for example, somebody tries to sell capuchin monkeys from Africa, we looked at this fraud and we said, look, you know, a fraud is an advanced scam. So basically, the person says, hey, I'm selling you capuchin monkeys from Africa. I have them. Give me $1,000 as an advance, and I will send it to you, to you. And then he takes the $1,000, and that is a scam. But we realize that if you look at the money, you realize that if somebody does that and realize that somebody else wants a gorilla or a chimp somewhere else, and instead of frauding him for $1,000, he can actually do the deal and find a chimp and sell the chimp and get $20,000. So the actual trade is more profitable than the scam itself. So we were thinking the scammers will turn into real traffickers. And there is a disastrous potential in connecting demand and supply through the internet. It was not happening before. And that is actually the trend that was happening. And here is the first case where we actually saw it. The case of Philip. Philip was advertising primate skulls for sale. And we collaborated with the US authorities on this case. And we treated it as a scamming case. So for scamming case, we started arresting those scammers to stop this kind of phenomena before it becomes real trade. So we arrested him in Western Union, trying to get the money from us, basically. He filled in the question and answer for Western Union, which was, what is the money used for? Primate skulls. And we arrested him. And once we arrested him, we realized that this is Philip. Philip was actually selling and having primate skulls. He was a scammer turning into an internet trafficker. And when we worked with the US authorities to try to see how many DHL shipments he was making to the US, he made 22 shipments of merchandise that was even titled primate skulls. Okay, so he was doing that for 2 years. He was doing trading of wildlife after scamming. And he was saying, just for the last year, I was doing just from the skulls, $20,000. So I was trying to give you a bit of an insight on the illegal trade in apes, different kinds of trade, what you trade in, a bit of a profile of who they are, and to show you that yes, there are some chimps that can get to the doorsteps of the sanctuaries, but the real traffickers, they are not known, they will not be seen unless you really investigate and find them. But once you find them, you uncover real organized crime, very sophisticated, high-level corruption, and transnational organizations. So basically, if I want to give a message, the message is that corruption is really a high issue on wildlife crime, and to get wildlife criminals in jail, we need to fight corruption. And anybody out there can also push any government to get more measurable indicators and tangible results like convictions, jail terms of those wildlife criminals, and not to mix them up with the soft activities like workshops and seminars and others. So thank you very much for this time.
Thank you, Ofir. That's fascinating. And so now we're going to hear from Colin from CCC, and she'll tell us about what happens after the arrests, after the dramatic things that Ofir's just been sharing. So let me bring up your presentation, Chris, and we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity and the invitation to speak about that. So yeah, Gregg and Ofir explained you a lot of what happened before an animal arrived at the sanctuary. So I will give you basically an example or examples of what we experienced in our sanctuary. Next slide, please. Okay, so like Ofir said, and Greg as well, sanctuaries are key actors of law enforcement success. So it's a collaborative work, and it's a very long process in regard of the law enforcement part. And we collaborate a lot with law enforcement agencies like Eagle Network. But what you have to understand is that most animals confiscated from the illegal wildlife trade, when they arrive alive, in a sanctuary, they have experienced a violent capture, and most of the time they are injured, they are malnourished, dehydrated. So they need urgent veterinary care and also psychological attention. So most of the time it's impossible to release them right away. It's even more important for animals like primates or great apes. The rehabilitation process is vital. You will need specialized vet care, but also physical and psychological care to help the animal to recover, to heal. It's very important for young animals, and it's key for social animals like primates. And a rescued animal arriving in a sanctuary requires a lot of care, energy, and time, like Greg mentioned in his presentation. All of this has a huge cost, and that can be huge for a sanctuary. For example, for us in Guinea at the CCC, we estimate that the cost of care for one chimpanzee is about $2,000 to $2,500 per year. So it depends on how many chimpanzees you get during a year, and you all know that chimpanzees live very a long life, so it is a huge cost. So yeah, just to tell you that okay, the law enforcement process and the organization of the rescue is a very, very long part and complicated part, and we all work all together. But the confiscation of an animal, a primate, a chimpanzee, or great ape, is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chance for a primate like this, for this orphan. And so I will give you the examples of several chimpanzees we have rescued at CCC in Guinea. Just to give you a short information about us. So we are located in Guinea, West Africa. Ofir spoke a lot about Africa, Guinea, where we had a very big and massive illegal wildlife trade and involving chimpanzees as well. CCC is a PASA member, and we are also verified by GFAS, the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuary. And it was created in 1997 by the Guinean government. And at the moment, we care for 62 chimpanzees, and we have released 18 chimpanzees since 2008. Next slide, please. So yeah, the arrival of confiscated chimpanzees. So yeah, they have been confiscated by the law enforcement agency with the local authorities. Just to tell you, at the CCC, we don't do law enforcement. We cooperate with authorities and any agency working for that, but we don't do this. It's not our mandate. So basically, our work starts when the chimpanzees are confiscated. So we have two cases: mainly it's babies or young chimpanzees arriving. You can see on the left, two young chimpanzees were confiscated at the Sierra Leonean borders by Guinean authorities. And on the other side, you can see a young adult female that we had to rescue after the authorities called us. This chimp was roaming and living free in a village. So for the young and babies, it's generally easy to handle them because, yeah, they're small, they're young, but they are much more fragile emotionally and physically. When they arrive, it's really critical. You know, they can die in a few days or in a couple of weeks. And we have to give them time to settle down, to get familiar with their new surroundings, and to recover from the trip to the sanctuary. Because for us, for example, we are very remote, and it takes 4 hours from the first town. And sometimes we have to travel for 1 day in a car. So it's a very long and tiring trip. And yeah, with all of that, it has been a very big trauma they went through. So what we do is we assign a baby keeper to a new orphan to create an affective bond and give the baby the willingness to live. It's super important for very young orphan, usually less than 1 year old, because if they don't have this attachment, a new attachment created to a new person that is going to replace as much as possible the mother of the baby. Sometimes the babies, they just give up and they die. So it's super important. And for adult chimpanzees, it can be tricky for us because most of the time we don't know what happened to them. So sometimes we rescue adult chimpanzees from a case of illegal wildlife trade. We had a case several years ago where we collaborated with Charlotte, like Ofir mentioned, where an illegal zoo was closed, and there was 4 chimps at the time there, 3 young chimps and 1 adult chimp. So before these chimps, we knew what happened to him, but sometimes we have no idea. What happens sometimes is that people who have a chimp, when this chimp gets too big, too strong, if this animal is lucky, people just dump them in the forest. Most of the time, I guess they are killed, but sometimes we are called to capture them and to rescue them. So in this case, we have absolutely no idea what they went through. They survive a difficult life of captivity, but generally, if they survive, it means they are strong mentally and physically they are okay. But with these chimps, which is super difficult for us, is because they spend many, many years by themselves, so they lack all social abilities. So it is very complicated for us to rehabilitate them. Next slide, please. So yeah, just to give you also, for you to understand, I'm going to give you 2 examples of 2 different babies, 2 different cases. Tita was confiscated 2 days before Christmas in 2018 in collaboration with Gulf at the time. And so it was an horrific case, and maybe some of you know about her story. She was 8 months old when she was captured. And basically what happened is that the local authorities, they saw the poachers coming out of the forest with Tita and the body of a mother and sister. So they killed the mother, and they had to fight with her sister who tried to protect Tita for hours. And at the end, I think what we know that they wanted to capture the sister as well, but she didn't let the poacher do this. So at the end, they killed her. And so Tita was in a very, very bad state, like physically and emotionally. She had a broken arm, her nails were ripped off, and she was in a real state of shock because of the violence of the capture and the physical trauma as well, the pain she was feeling. It was terrible for her. So she was lucky enough. So because we got her only 2 days after capture, so we were able to take care of her. So at the time we had volunteers helping us. So we had one volunteer who stayed day and night with her for at least 1 month, just to give her comfort, to help her to eat, to try to, because it was taking hours to get her to eat, and because she couldn't use her broken arm. And at the time, the surgery was impossible. We asked for advice, and the fracture was, you can see on the picture, was very, very bad. And specialists recommended us some intervention that we couldn't do in our condition. So we have to keep her with a substitute mother for complete months without moving, so her arm could heal well, and she recovered like this. And she needed lots of attention, but also love. She needed attention, physical contact, and yeah, it took her about 2 weeks before she smiled for the first time, and it was like a big success. And when she got better, at the time we got 2 other babies, and we integrated her with other babies as soon as possible. And now Tita is doing wonderful. She's wonderful. She's in a very good shape. So this case to show you that yeah, we can receive babies in horrible physical state and also psychologically broken, but we can recover with a lot of attention. Now I'm going to speak about the next example. Yes, next slide, please. So Dali is a chimp we rescued last year with the Guinean authorities. So you can see on the first picture on the left, that's how he was in captivity when the authorities found him. You can see he seems healthy, nothing special, but you can see how sad he looks. He looks very, very depressed. He only had an injury at his leg that at the time was already healed. But this case is to show you that, like, this chimp Dali was completely broken. He was depressed. He was in a psychological state, like very. It is difficult to assess because it's invisible, but it can kill them very quickly. And at the time, he was about 3 years old, and he didn't trust any human. So when we got him, you can see on the last picture, we assigned one of our baby keeper, Mukhtar, who is really, really good with babies. So he came to meet with the authorities and to take directly Dali before even arriving at the sanctuary. And so just to explain you, we train our keepers, you know, they are professionals, so they know how to vocalize the gesture that the chimps do between themselves in the wild. So like when we have to rescue a baby chimp like this, our keepers know what to do to reconfort the baby, to reassure him, and to make him feel safe and to trust him. So you can see, like, Dali directly went into Mukhtar's arm. And so Mukhtar took care of him for all his quarantine period. The next slide, please. So yeah, what we did, well, at the time we assigned 2 keepers, so they could rotate, Lamine and Mukhtar. They are mainly our 2 baby keepers. So during Dali's quarantine, they took care of him, and it was super important for Dali to bond with his 2 new father, not his father, but just to help them to recover. So at the beginning, Dali was completely fine. He had absolutely no problem. He was healthy, but he was really depressed, and he was not laughing, not playing. He was eating okay, but not great. And after a few weeks, he felt really, really sick. He started to have very serious diarrhea, huge anorexia. He refused to take any treatment. So it was, and his health status was deteriorating very, very fast. So it was very complicated. The next slide, please. And so, yeah, we had to do like intensive medical treatment with anesthesia to give him his treatment, because he was refusing anything. And at the time, so our keepers spent a lot of time with him, and as well as our resident vet. We were staying with him at night to be sure he was okay. And just so this example is just to explain you that the importance of the people around the new orphan, to give them the willingness to live, because at the time Dali basically wanted to die, and I think sometimes, yeah, we can't do anything even if we put a lot of energy in this, but if we provide them with the good care and with the love, the attention, and also like showing them you know, chimp behavior, they respond very well. So we managed to save Dali with lots of patience and love, and now he's a very fine and a happy chimp, and we are very happy for that. Next slide, please. So just to go back a bit about, okay, what happened when a chimp arrived at the sanctuary. What we do at the CCC, and then it's like more general protocol that all sanctuaries have, but yeah, we have to adapt to our condition. But in our case, what we do is we always wait several days before doing anything on the chimps, just to give the chimpanzees time to recover from the trip. During the quarantine, the first step is to do a general health check. It's super important. But for that, you need most of the time an anesthesia. And anesthesia is always a risky procedure. So the chimps need to be strong enough physically to handle it. So yeah, we wait generally several days to 1 week or 2 weeks if necessary before doing that. For young chimps, we do generally like a small anesthesia or sedation. And for an adult chimp, for sure, you need to have a general anesthesia. This checkup is super important, this first checkup, because yeah, they spend most of the time days or weeks or months in captivity, in bad condition, with other animals sometimes, or with other chimpanzees, we don't know. So they can get disease. We can't introduce any disease in the sanctuary. So we check for the general condition. We look at the teeth. It's super important to look at the teeth because it gives us a very good idea of the age. You know, it's in chimpanzees like in humans, teeth appears at a certain age, and the adult teeth, appears the same thing at a certain age. So we can assess the age quite well with the examination of teeth. It works for young chimpanzees and adult chimpanzees as well. During the examination, we can look at the skin if you don't have any parasites. It's frequent injuries that we can treat. We check the health condition, the lungs. And generally what we do is we take blood samples for analysis, but we have to do, for us at the moment, we have to do it in Europe. So we have to ship it to Europe with site-based permit, like Gregg explained. We also do a TB, tuberculosis test. It's super important because tuberculosis is a disease very frequent in Africa, and the chimpanzees, like other primates, are very sensible to this disease. And also, when we can, we do hair collection for DNA analysis to confirm the subspecies of the chimpanzees. And yeah, so that's what we do. It's our resident vet who does that, and that's part of the training we do with the keepers. Every time we do a medical examination of a chimp, our keepers take part of it, and so they understand what we do and what we check. So next slide, please. So yeah, basically the quarantine of a new arrival is between 1 to 3 months, depending on the health and the psychological status for young chimpanzees. We don't do like 3 months all the time, because sometimes if you know that the baby is safe, it doesn't have any disease, it's safe to integrate him with others. Sometimes it's more important to introduce him quickly with other chimpanzees than keeping him separated from the others for his own willingness to live. It's super important for a baby chimp or young chimp to be with other chimps as soon as possible. So during the quarantine of a young chimpanzees or baby chimpanzees, like I said, we have a baby keeper or two that can rotate with the baby, and so they can create a bond. And what we do is when the baby is attached to the keeper, they can go in the forest and they can spend several hours in the bush. So the baby can play, they can climb the trees. It can start to be like a real baby chimpanzees. And for adult chimpanzees, we do 3 months quarantine. because it's more safe. Because yeah, we don't know what happened to them, so it's better to keep them longer in quarantine to be sure they are healthy. So we keep them isolated from the others. After quarantine of an adult chimpanzees, what we can try to do is to find a group to integrate the individual. But it's always challenging because, like I told you before, most of the time they lack the social skills. So it's super complicated for us to integrate adult chimpanzees. And also, because if you have a young chimpanzees, it's quite easy. You can put two young chimpanzees together. It's easy to handle and to manage. But when you have a new adult chimpanzees, it is difficult because you need the space, you need the infrastructures, and this is very challenging. And for us at CCC, for example, we received 5 adult chimpanzees in the last 5 years, which can seem not much, but for us it is very problematic, especially for males. We had 3 males and 2 females, so we managed to introduce quickly the 2 females into groups, but for the males at the moment we still haven't had the opportunity to introduce them to a group because we don't have the space and the infrastructure. So we have to build new infrastructure to be able to have enough space to create a new group, or to have the facility secured enough to introduce a new male into a group, because it's not natural to introduce a 15 or 18 years old male chimpanzees into a group. It's not natural, so it requires a lot of time, space, and money for sure. And so for us, it's very difficult to plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so quickly for us at the CCC, when the orphan passed the quarantine, we introduced them into a social group, and they spent years as a group in what we call the forest school. So basically, it's a group of young chimps, and they spend their days in the forest with their keepers. And it's where they learn all the ecological skills they will need to survive into the wild if we can release them one day. So it's the beginning for them also to learn how to live as a group, because they were, removed from their family very young, so they don't know what it is to be in a group. So yeah, it's years of happiness for them, I would say, like living free in the forest and going every day in the forest, so we can learn what to eat, and they learn from each other, which is super important. We do at the sanctuary at the moment, what we do is we keep these young chimps about 5 to 6 years, sometimes even longer, in this rehabilitation process step, like the forest school. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, when they become teenager, we stop the forest school, and then we introduce these chimps into social groups. And so they stay as a group in a forested enclosure, and we try to reduce the contact with humans. So it's only limited to feedings and vet cares and stuff like that. So it's when they start to be more as a chimp family. They build their social relationship with each other. They learn to live in a complex society. And they also learn the subtle social behaviors they need to survive as a group in the wild. And this is not something that we can teach them. They learn from each other. Sadly, some chimps never learn all the social skills, and sometimes it takes years for them to learn all of this. But most of them manage, and they behave as a wild group, or they are not wild, but a real family, and it is good to see them evolve and growing together and learning from each other. And what we do at CCC is we keep them as a social group for up to 4 to 6 years before being ready to be released. So it's a very, very long process. So we don't release chimpanzees who are less than 12, 13, 14 years old. Next slide, please. So yeah, if for the lucky ones, we can, well, CCC is doing release of chimpanzees. So like I said, it's a very, very long process of rehabilitation from a baby arriving at the sanctuary and growing up and before being able to be released. Releasing chimpanzees is very challenging. First of all, the chimpanzees need all the social and ecological skills to be able to survive. And what we have learned from our experience is that the social skills are even more important than the ecological skills. They also need to be independent from humans. You can't release a chimp who is very attached to humans, and that's something you can't really predict. And even if we work the same way with all chimpanzees, some will never get, detached from us. So it is very difficult. Also, and I will like to emphasize this problem is the problem to find a suitable release site. There is many criteria to follow. We follow the IUCN guidelines, and the reality in Africa, like in the rest of the world, is that there is not enough wild space left for wild animals. So it is very, very difficult to find a good place to release them. At the moment, CCC is the only sanctuary releasing chimpanzees in Africa, but we have colleagues and friends in PASA who are looking at this possibility. We have another project to help Congo Congo who released chimpanzees before us, and we learned a lot from them. But at the moment, we are the only one doing it. It's so yeah. From all what you saw is like if you want to release a chimp, it's a very, very long process. So it means years in captivity in a sanctuary. So it is very costly. But also what we need to understand is that even if we can release a chimpanzee, it's not the end of the story. These chimps keep their link with humans. So it's not like you can just release them and say, okay, good luck, goodbye. No, the monitoring is key. And it's key because you need to ensure that they are adapting well, they are reproducing, and also that they don't have a negative interaction with people. And like for us in Guinea, it's not a big country, but it's big enough, but the population is not big, but we have people everywhere. So even in the middle of the forest, you can find someone hunting for duikers or whatever, or collecting honey. And so you can't allow any negative interaction, like the chimp to kill a person, or a person killing the chimp. So it is very important to monitor them. You can see in the picture that all our chimps, not all of them, but most of our chimps are equipped with collars, so we can monitor them. Even if it can be looked at very invasive, like this, we can ensure the safety and the safety of people living around. And the important factor is the survival of the second generation of the group. At the moment, we have 6 babies in the group, and yeah, they are doing well. But our oldest second generation is 6 years old now, so we hope she will continue to grow up and like the rest of the babies. And yeah, the release is not an option, a very easy option. Just to give you a number, the CCC released less than 20% of the rescued chimpanzees over the years, because we rescued more than 100 chimpanzees since the beginning of the project, and we only released 18. So it's a very long process, and it's not the only solution for every orphan arriving at the sanctuary. So it means most of them will stay in captivity all their life. So it will be very long, and the sanctuary has to take care of them. Next slide, please. So yeah, like I said previously, the confiscation of an orphan chimpanzee is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a very long process, and most of the time of a very long life in captivity. And sanctuaries need support to take care for these orphans. Because like we said, like Gregg mentioned, and Ofir showed in his presentation as well, that the law enforcement can't be done if there is no sanctuary to take care of the animals, so chimpanzees or any other animals. So we are like a key element of this whole process. And when you see, if you follow sanctuaries or like, I don't know, if you're interested in conservation or law enforcement agencies work, if you see a confiscation, a success, okay, I think what is important is to ask you what's going to happen to this confiscated animal, where is going to go, who is going to take care of this animal, and for how long, at what cost. It is the beginning of a very long process, and we need support from the public and from everybody to take care of these animals, because if we can take care of these rescued animals, the agencies can keep working on enforcing the law and stopping the traffickers of this horrific trade. And I think that's it for me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. That was fascinating. And thank you to Ofir as well, and to Gregg for giving us such a great overview of everything. We do have a couple of questions. And since people have stayed on the line, we might as well go at them. First question is, why would a primate organization choose not to be part of something like PASA? What might be the advantages of going it alone? Gregg, do you want to give that one a shot?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I've actually never known of an organization that made a decision not to be part of PASA. I mean, I can say, we call it the PASA family, and when an organization is a member of PASA, we do virtually everything we can to ensure that they stay open and survive, which is a big commitment. So organizations need to go through a stringent accreditation process in order to join PASA. It's a substantial amount of work. For some sanctuaries, it requires expanding their facilities and maybe diversifying their fundraising or changing their management structures. So yeah, it can take years. So there are organizations that have said they're not in a position right now to make the changes necessary to join PASA and go through the accreditation process, or it's just not a good time for them. But yeah, I would say the only reason I've ever heard of not to join PASA is just the effort required to meet our standards. I mean, no one has ever told me they sort of disagree with our standards or they think they would do better by not being part of the alliance. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes, I think it does. The second one is just a thank you from Tanya to say how much she appreciated all the work that all of these organizations do. I think we'd all second that. It's impressive, to say the least, the commitment and just the heart that goes into it. So we really want to give a heartfelt thanks to both to Chris and to Ofir for the amazing work you're doing on the ground to help save these animals and bring people to justice who are harming them. We all appreciate that. And of course, to the PASA network and team who are helping raise awareness and funds and kind of keeping the lights on here. And speaking of funds, if you do feel moved to share whatever you have to help support this work, we would always appreciate it. You can drop us a line at pasa.org/donate, and there's lots of ways to share whatever you have to give. It makes a huge difference, and we get it as quickly as possible to the places where it's needed most, and we couldn't do the work without you. So with that, I think we're a wrap, and just really want to say thank you again to our fabulous panelists and to you all for attending, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.